It's time for Southern Fried Baseball, presented by College Baseball Central. Hosted by Jake McKeever as he talks everything SEC baseball and more.
Welcome in, College Baseball Central fans. Week 4 is behind us. We're all done with these out-of-conference games, if you will. We're moving next week into SEC play. Jake McKeever, Andrew, again, back to talk more SEC stuff. Since everybody in the SEC won their series outside of Missouri who split, I figured it'd be a better use of our time to go in and point out holes that Andrew and I both see in every single SEC team as we get into conference play. Thursday night, we'll be doing our conference preview for that first week, as well as doing picks. Let's go ahead and jump into it with the unanimous number one, aside from D1. Tennessee Volunteers are one of 2 teams in the entire country that are still undefeated, along with them in Florida State. They have a little midweek tune-up against West Georgia before playing Florida. I'll go ahead and kick us off. I think the 2 things that really stand out to me about this Tennessee team is, one, they have faced zero adversity, so we have no idea how they're going to react when they're down. They've really controlled every single game from the jump. 2, I don't think they really have a good Sunday guy. As I know, AJ Russell's kind of working himself back. They've gone with an opener a few times, definitely some bullpen games. I don't think that's going to be that too big of an issue just because they have a really, really talented bullpen. I think they have one of the best bullpens in the country. But Andrew, what do you think Tennessee's glaring hole is right now?
The best team they faced has been or Xavier, Oklahoma State, and Arizona. The news came out yesterday that AJ Russell will probably not throw now till April. It looks like they're going to shut him down or put him on a new throwing program to get him ready for, it looks like, the back end of SEC play and get him ready for postseason play. Yeah, they haven't faced any adversity. Their Sunday guys okay, but I think they can rely on their bullpen and the arms they have there to get them that Sunday win. They open up with Florida next week. That'll be an interesting one, especially with who Florida will probably be throwing Friday and Saturday if Coppola's not available. I'd like to see those arms like be Sunday, maybe a split Sunday, rubber match on Sunday.
Yeah, I will say this. It does feel very nitpicky for us to talk about Tennessee. Tennessee has done everything that was asked of them in this kind of non-conference slate. They're going to sit 16-0. I think it's their best start in Tennessee baseball history. It's the best start for a defending champion since South Carolina. Actually, I think that's the best start for champion period as they started off. Not a lot of holes. They hit for power. They have really great frontline rotation. Like we already mentioned, they have really good bullpen guys. I think Tennessee is going to be completely fine, if not one of the best teams in the country, long into the season. Moving on to the team with the most wins, second highest win percentage, the Georgia Bulldogs at 18-1. They're 13-0 at home, 3-1 on the road, 2-0 in neutral. I think my biggest holes for them is starting pitching. I don't really feel too great about the starting pitching that they have. I think that their lineup is very boom bust. I think that they live a little bit in that tiny ballpark. And then 3, and the most glaring issue for me, and we'll talk about it with another SEC team, they didn't play anybody. So we really don't know how good this Georgia team actually is. They faced a ton of adversity. They won a ton of close games. But, they're 18-1. They have 18 wins. I don't feel really good about their Friday nights. I don't think that I trust Leighton Finley or Colton Smith or JT Quinn. I know he's the midweek guy in a Friday night role. I think that they're going to be out talented a ton in a Friday night role.
Yeah, I think they're going to rely a lot on their hitting, it looks like. Starting pitching, that's what I had. I had starting pitching has been inconsistent. It hasn't looked good, especially against some very weak opponents. I mean, Columbia kind of hit the ball against them this weekend, and then FGCU gave them a lot of adversity last weekend. They did lead NCAA baseball for, I think, a measly 3 hours in home runs till Tennessee played their game. So, yeah, they'll probably live and die by the home run in their small ballpark, but pitching's going to be a problem for them, I think.
Yeah, I believe that they are currently second, as I'm pulling up the stat from Olivia Sayer that I saw. If I can find it. Brian Curley's been really good. So they have silver lining is the bullpen has picked up the slack, but I mean, you have to remember Wes Johnson has these guys in a bullpen for a reason, and yes, that
Mhm.
they're going to have different roles, but I mean, that's a really big red flag for me if you're starting to over rely on your bullpen in non-conference play. Because you got to remember,
Mhm.
there's a reason that these guys weren't in the starting rotation. Again, Georgia's going to be in that S tier of SEC teams. Georgia's 45 home runs this series are currently ranked second. Team with the third home runs is East Tennessee State, who they will play Thursday again. And Tennessee fans flooded into the comments to attack them. I think Georgia's going to be 5.
Yeah.
I have Georgia in tier 2 going into non-conference play. That's where I had them to start the season. There's really, I think, only one team that I moved out of different tiers. Georgia's going to be fine. Moving
Mhm.
on to number 3 on the list, third most wins, tied with LSU. Alabama Crimson Tide. They are 12-1 at home, 1-0 on the road, 3-0. I think that their issue is the over-reliance on bullpen arms. Their
Mhm.
starters have been so good. Like Riley Quick and Zane Adams are, I think, one of the best Friday-Saturday combo guys in the country. I will say, when they went to that Ohio State game, their bullpen was really, really impressive.
Mhm.
They banged the ball around the yard. I think that they're almost warranting again. But here's the thing, and I was talking to Micah about it. Yes, they went down and dominated in Jacksonville, but this is kind of a nitpicky show. It's kind of aged poorly. Like Ohio State's hasn't really won a game. Coastal
Yeah.
Carolina isn't the Coastal Carolina of years past. They got NC State during, I think, the absolute worst time. So I'm really high on Zane Adams. I'm really high on Riley Quick. I'm really high on some of the bullpen arms that they do, but they really haven't played anybody that would warrant this. It's going to be a good test against them for Texas A&M, but that's the glaring weakness that I have for them. And obviously an over-reliance on the long ball. They do manufacture a ton of runs, I will say.
Yeah.
There are this one, I'm gonna be honest with you. I had to kind of nitpick to try and find something that was wrong with this Alabama team.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I can't tear down like Will Hoodoo and Justin LeBron. Like they've been playing out of their minds right now. But yeah, I agree. Their bullpen hasn't been that. It it hasn't gotten any tests besides like coming in down 10-0 against Ohio State, but yet again Ohio State's been nothing so far. Yeah, Riley Quick's been phenomenal. I think they're gonna have to rely a lot on Tyler Fay in the back end of the bullpen at times, even Carson Ozumer. It's going to be difficult in the bullpen, I feel like, but that's nitpicking. They've looked phenomenal so far. It's tough to nitpick a team that's played good so far.
I have a feeling that this time next week we'll be tearing apart either Texas A&M or Alabama. I'm gonna be honest
Yeah,
with you. I
yeah, I
don't
agree.
see a ton of holes with this Alabama team. Um, Again, you want their Sunday guy to be a little bit better, but I think that's just because Zane Adams and Riley Quick at the top of that rotation are just so good and dominant
Mhm.
that it makes your Sunday guy look a little bit weird. But we'll go ahead and move on to another team. I think that we are kind of nitpicking. LSU is 16-1. They're 12-1 at home. They went up and dominated on they beat DBU in a midweek and they dominated in Frisco. The holes that I have for them are the over reliance on the long ball, and I feel like they strike out a little bit too much for a team that manufactures runs. It feels like at times they kind of strike out a good amount.
Yeah, I agree. They did start to rely a lot on the long ball this past week. I think they finished off the weekend or the whole week with I think 15 home runs that came out of nowhere. But
Okay, I will say this before we talk about that: the Bear Jones home run. That's just not going to be a home run in SEC play. It's not going to be a home run not on that day. Like that's going to be an out. Where a
I think
lot of
he
the
thought it was foul.
I know that you watched every single game.
Yeah,
Was it just like the wind blowing out like at an insane rate? Because I feel like they had a lot of
yeah.
cheap home runs.
The weather this week in Louisiana has not been the best. So and especially when I went on Wednesday, the wind was like howling. Like the two home runs Bear hit on Wednesday, those are probably off the wall at majority of the other ballparks in the SEC. But I mean, yeah, it's a favorable ballpark for LSU, and yeah, that's gonna be a problem when they face other SEC teams, not named Missouri, at home. So
I will say this too. The other thing that kind of scares me about this LSU team is that when you profile as one of these contact teams, I feel like they're not that athletic. Like I know Curriell's a burner and I know Stanfield's a burner, but like I don't think Milam's a super athletic freak. I don't think Dickinson is. Like, they're not really that athletic of a team for one that's profiling the play as this manufacturer hit and run type team.
Yeah, they haven't been trying to run a lot. It seems like there was a period of time that Jared Jones was the stolen base leader on the team. When a team like with a guy like Curiel and Chris Stanfield, that shouldn't be the case. That I agree with Milam not being
And
that.
Reeves, if Reeves is going to play third base for him too, he's
Yeah,
really not a burner.
yeah. That's probably my one flaw for them is who's going to be at third base. If Tanner Reeves going to keep hitting the crap out of the ball, or is Michael Braswell going to come in and hit SEC pitching like he did last year?
Yeah, they do have kind of a contingency plan with Bear Jones to play third base if stuff really hits the fan. Again, I do not think that would be the case, but there is
No.
a contingency plan. But again, LSU, I will say this. I know that we've been very critical of LSU. It's
Mhm.
because I have them in that S tier. I think that
Yeah.
they warrant criticism. They're an Omaha team, in my opinion. Moving on to another team, which the Arkansas Razorbacks, they sit at 15-1. They've played with fire a ton on Friday night. Their one loss is in a Gabe Gackle start. The thing that worries me about this Arkansas Razorbacks team is they feel really boom bust.
Mhm.
That when the lineup clicks, it clicks. And when it doesn't, it really doesn't. And it looks bad and stuff goes downhill for them quick. It feels like, again, I think they play a good brand of baseball. They play perfect baseball a lot. But I feel like unless they play an absolute perfect game, they're a very beatable team, which I think that they're kind of one of those control your own cycle type of teams where nobody in the country can beat Arkansas when Arkansas plays up to their standard. But
Mhm.
I could see them dropping a ton of games because they just compound bat at bat after bat at bat after bat at bat in a lineup that can't manufacture at all. It feels like they have to bang home runs, bang doubles because they're not a super fast team at all.
Yeah, and I think they get the perfect test to start SEC going to Ole Miss to really test that lineup. Yeah, I agree. They have been very boomer bust. They have left a lot of guys on base. Strikeouts. They're striking out at like a little high of a rate, I think, but it's Brent Iredale. He's been phenomenal. Uh, the Aloy brothers have been phenomenal. So it has been boomer bust, but I agree. If they play their style of baseball, I think they are probably one of the top 5 teams in college baseball.
I think they're number one. I'm going to be honest with you. Their peak, like the way that they play, and granted, it was Portland, but the way that they played Friday night with Gabe Gackle, the bullpen that they have Zach Root to supplement on Saturday, who I think is just going to eat innings for him and save that bullpen.
Hmm.
I think, again, I don't think Tennessee's warranted any dropping out of the number one spot, but if you were
No.
to give me a neutral field, both teams play at their best, I think I would take Arkansas.
Yeah, and they're also doing this without Gage Wood. There still hasn't really been an update on Gage Wood. I think he could be back in 2 to 3 weeks. But Landon Beidle, I know
Beetle
his
cheese.
Beetle Cheese. He
Yeah.
threw
Cream
phenomenal
cheese.
today. He's gonna keep eating innings in that Sunday starter spot. But I'm very excited to see them go to Ole Miss next week. That's gonna be a very under the radar with one other series that we have left, the UF Tennessee series. But I think this Ole Miss Arkansas series can make a lot of noise.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an absolutely electric one, which brings us to our next team who sits at 14-1. Their one loss is to a fellow SEC school, so they are undefeated in non-SEC play, even though that doesn't really count because it's a
Hmm.
weird scenario. The Ole Miss Rebels. Hunter Elliott has looked absolutely impressive. I will say this. If you're going to make me nitpick on it, he hasn't had to pitch to a lineup that's really made him work. Because even on opening night, when they played, who'd they beat? Was it Louisville?
Arizona.
Arizona really didn't push the envelope on it. It was a very carefree, relaxed start. So I'm
Yeah.
interested to see when a team forces him to push the envelope, grinds out at bats against him, how he kind of does. Riley Maddox is another guy who he really got shelled in that Texas series when he faced a good lineup. Outside of that, he's been really good. The lineup, I don't think warrants any question marks for them. I think that the one thing that really does kind of scare me is they're not an athletic team in the field, but it
Hmm.
feels like they're going to win a lot of games 4-2, which if you're going to make me nitpick and find something that scares me about this Ole Miss team, is that they have a lot of unathletic guys that could just bang the ball 400 feet.
Yeah.
Like Uttermark as a third baseman doesn't really bring me a lot of confidence. Um, Whatever they're kind of cycling through at shortstop, and then the outfield, I wouldn't say that they're a super athletic team. Again, we're nitpicking. I think that they're going to be very, very fine in the SEC. But that
Yeah.
is the one thing that scares me is that a lot of these teams that are built pitchers first are athletic. Like we'll talk about OU in a second. And OU doesn't burn it on the baselines. They don't push the envelope. They're not legging out doubles. They don't feel like an athletic enough team for the style that they play.
Yeah, I agree. But I think that comes with the brand that Mike Bianco's been playing lately, it feels like. Um, but I'm not really that worried about their
I'm not worried
lineup
about them either. I do want to say that. I'm not worried about them.
yeah, I'm not worried about them. I think this I think this team is like set up perfectly now with how everything worked out for them non-conference because it felt like there's a lot of question marks coming in for Ole Miss this season, and they responded perfectly. I'm not really that worried about them. I can see the athleticism part of it, but I'm not. I'm pretty high on Ole Miss now.
Yeah, and I love Luke Hill. I think he's probably
Hmm.
one of the best players no one's talking about in the SEC. I think that they're going to be fine. They're in a really, really good spot to set up and host, which feels crazy to talk about with Ole Miss. But they're set up really, really nicely with what they did in the non-conference slate. Moving on to Oklahoma, who sits at 13-1. They lost on this
They're
week,
mid.
didn't they? Yeah, they
Yep,
lost
they
to
lost
midweek.
to DBU, got their butts kicked.
That's what it was. Other than that, they've looked tremendous. They're a super, super athletic team. I think that they have a lot more
Mhm.
power than people have kind of given them credit for. Um, the thing that scares me about them is it feels like they are really fine with just Justin Bodine as a bullpen arm. And then outside of that, it really is not necessarily a crapshoot, but you really don't know what you're going to get. So I feel like they're going to do a 3+1 type system. And as we
Mhm.
kind of saw, was it Friday with Jason Bodine where he got kind of shelled?
Yeah,
Um, I think too, um, they are relying a ton on guys that have never played in the SEC. And granted, it is their
yeah,
first year in the SEC, but I think that that's kind of the one knock that you can give them is they really don't know the test that's about to come for them, where
yeah,
every single weekend's kind of a grind. Um, I think they're a talented team. I think that the biggest knock on them was the lineup. The lineup has some thump. If they can figure out kind of how to play their brand of baseball and make the SEC teams beat them, I actually feel really comfortable about OU going forward. Um, Again, this one was really hard to kind of find a nitpicking thing, but
mm,
for me, I think it's a bullpen.
yeah,
And if you play a brand of baseball that's over reliance when people make errors and you explode it, if people don't make errors, stuff can kind of go downhill for you, and they do kind of drag on. Like in the Virginia game, I know that was a Sunday game, but Virginia didn't make errors until they did, and then OU beat them.
yeah.
And it really was kind of a stagnant offense. So when you play some of these elite teams that force you to kind of make plays, a lot of times people in the SEC make plays.
Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma's been doing a good job putting pressure on them, but when they get the pressure applied to them, I mean, they've done okay. I think they've gotten to the point now where they can stretch out the Witherspoon brothers,
Mhm.
where they don't have to rely that much on the bullpen on Friday or maybe even Saturday. Um, we could see probably both of them go 6, 7 innings, and the thing is, if it's like a 1-0, 2-0 game, could they rely on other bullpen arms? So, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one thing. And again, I think that they're kind of now that they're in the SEC more open to criticism.
Hmm.
Um, Moving on to another team that has absolutely dominated and is really kind of what we didn't expect. If I'm being honest with you, the Texas Longhorns
Yeah.
sit at 13-1 with 13 straight victories. The bullpen has just been phenomenal for them. They've won games in a variety of different ways. I will say this: the one thing that if you're going to make me nitpick about them, I think the lineup has an over reliance on the long ball. Like Max Blue's a banger. Jalen Flores is a banger. Gasparino's added a ton of power. I don't, and I will say this: they the other thing that kind of scares me about Texas, and this is kind of a fallacy theory that I have, is that if you win too many games early, you lose up your good graces. I think that's one thing that scares me about Texas is that they used up a lot of their good graces early on. Like they didn't really look that impressive against the Santa Clara team that's not very good this weekend.
Mm,
The bullpen was really, really good for him. Jared Spencer was elite, but they haven't impressed me since that week one. And that's the one thing, if you're going to make me nitpick on Texas, I feel like they just win. They never dominate outside of obviously the Ole Miss game.
I think they looked good in Vegas. They looked good in
I don't think they looked good in
globally.
Vegas
Really?
at all. The hot take, I felt like, again, and it really wasn't their fault because the Vegas field was not very deep, but
Yeah.
the bullpen didn't look very good against Washington. The
Yeah,
bullpen against Tech kind of came back. They hit really good, but it wasn't like elite pitching. I didn't think they really looked. I like, again, we're nitpicking. This is a nitpicking show. I didn't think they looked that impressive, and I've been waiting for them to look dominant in a game, and they really haven't. Even their midweek against A&M Corpus Christi, they were down at one point in that game, and yes, they did run rule them, but I think if you want to be considered an elite team in the SEC, they're not an elite team in the SEC. They never dominate like some of these other teams.
I agree. They've won their games. They've done their job. They've done the bare minimum. They've won. They've only lost one game.
That's good. They've done the bare minimum. I think
they've done the bare minimum.
Yeah.
They've done their job. It's like the same thing with Tennessee because Tennessee really hasn't faced that much adversity. They've done their job. They've won every game that they're supposed to win. It's bare minimum.
Again, I do like Volantis in that Sunday role. I liked Grubb on Saturday. So there's a lot of good pieces there that I think warrant us talking about them and criticizing them like an elite team. But I don't really know what they're going to do with a lineup since either. They're still kind of working through lineup issues. They haven't had a few people step up. Like they haven't had Instant Winfield or Tommy Farmer, one of them take over that job. They're still kind of playing around with Cole Chamberlain, Casey Borba, and Adrian Rodriguez in different senses. So that's the other thing too, is when you watch them, they don't have a set lineup. And we'll talk about that with Mississippi State. I think that's another kind of red flag issue is that they're still trying to figure stuff out.
Yeah.
And it's SEC play next weekend. Like you should really have your lineup set. Moving on to Florida, I think probably one of the most impressive teams. They sit at 15-2. They here's the thing that scares me about them. They haven't gone on the road yet, and they haven't played anybody elite yet, too. And yes, their starting pitching has been good. I don't know where they're going to get outs in that bullpen. Maybe I think Pierce Coppola, I think his injury is more long-term. I will say this. I think Aiden King is a fantastic guy, and I think they're not going to skip a beat moving him into the Saturday night role. But he was their flex guy before. They still have Luke McNeely. I don't know where they're going to get outs in some of these SEC weekends. Again, they have elite starting pitching that's going to shorten these games, and they're probably only going to be chasing 18 outs a game instead of 27. They're only going to be chasing 9 outs, so I guess 27 in a weekend.
Yeah.
I think that they can do enough to piece together 27 outs, but there isn't one guy that you could look at in that bullpen. And again, I think Florida's an elite S-tier team. The other thing that really kind of scares me about them is there's a lot of guys you expect to do good that just really have started slow for them. And yes, Brody Donay is hitting over 430 for them, but I don't think that's something that you can count on in SEC play. And I think that they don't have a lot. They're still trying to mask and figure out some of these lineup issues. They have a lot of guys hitting down in the 280s in non-conference play. That's kind of my criticism for Florida.
Yeah. A lot of the guys been getting banged up. Obviously, Coppola, it is looking more long-term from what I've heard. I'm hearing his shoulder. So I guess it wasn't a blister issue. Jay Clemente for them now. He didn't throw this weekend. Sullivan said he's banged up now with a back injury. A couple of their guys banged up. They just lost their center fielder the other day for the whole season, the Stetson transfer. It's going to be a lot of guys stepping up now. Can't be relying on just small things.
Bobby Bowser.
Yeah.
Bobby Bowser.
Blake Sires got to step up. He hasn't really lived up to the hype since he's transferred in from Miami, in my opinion. But I agree. I think Peterson and
I think
King.
Kevin O'Sullivan would reiterate that point to you. I don't really think he's been that impressive as a transfer. And you look around
Yeah,
at some of these other SEC transfers. Again, I think they're an S tier team. Do you have
mhm.
them in kind of that S tier?
I got him in the S tier mostly because of their starting pitching. Even
Mhm.
I love King as a Saturday starter. I want to see what they're gonna do Sunday now. With if Coppola's out long term, if they keep on rotating that, if it ends up being a bullpen kind of game. But yeah, I have him in a S tier.
Yeah, I do too as well. Moving on to another completely unknown team, the Kentucky Wildcats sit at 12-2. If you remember correctly, they had some of their opening games canceled, so they had played less games.
Hmm.
They were on at the time a 10-game winning streak. They lost on Saturday. I don't know how to feel about Kentucky. On paper, they don't have a lot of talent, but they didn't have a
Hmm.
lot of talent last year on paper, and they
Yeah.
really went out and dominated in SEC play. Honestly, I think that they're better this year than they were last year, as
Hmm.
crazy as that is. Um, their starting pitching seems to be a step below everybody else in the SEC in terms of MLB draft guys.
Yeah.
So I think that that's the one thing is that they don't have anybody that's an elite starting pitcher. I think that they have a lot of quality starting pitchers. I think that they have a lot of good starting pitchers, but they don't have hey, we're giving the ball to Gabe Gackle. We know he's going to get 7 innings of 1-run ball for us. They
Yeah.
just don't have that. And again, I will say that I forget the kid's name, but their starter has given them that. But at the end of the day, he's a 6-year guy.
Yeah, Nick
Um,
McKay, he's been good so far, but like you said, it is a step below these Gabe Gackles, these Liam Petersons, these Kate Andersons, Prager
Again,
from A&M.
I would be shocked. And again, I'll eat a shoe if I end up being wrong about this. But realistically, where's he rank on SEC's Friday night guys for you, Nick McKay? Again, he's had good numbers, but where's he rank for SEC Friday night guys?
Maybe
And you can be generous. I won't make you call him out. You can be extremely generous. What is his peak?
maybe above Georgia, Missouri, and yeah, maybe just above those two. I mean,
Again, and you can kind of get a little bit generous with
Vandy
SU.
maybe. JD Thompson's been okay for Vandy.
That's what I mean, is you have to get really generous to get him into the
Yeah.
12 range. And again, I like him. He has great numbers.
Yeah, he's been
But at the end
phenomenal
of
so
at the end
far.
of the day, like if you're picking on paper and saying, okay, do we want, Liam Peterson, Liam Doyle, Ryan Prager, Gabe Gackle? He's not in that tier. Like he's
No.
a good Saturday guy. He reminds me a lot of Leighton Finley. I think that that's a good
Hmm.
analogy.
Yeah.
And in the SEC, you need to win on Friday night. And if
Hmm.
he's your Friday night guy, I think that really kind of sets you up a little. And the other thing too is you can really get out of control if your starter doesn't eat innings as a Friday night guy. I mean,
Yeah.
LSU literally won a national championship because they had a Friday night guy that would eat innings for him.
Yeah. They need
Um,
innings, and they force the other team to knock their starter out first on Friday. That's something Jay Johnson lives by. Knocking out their Friday starter first, getting to their bullpen early, and then 10-run ruling them on Sunday. That's how they won the national championship 2 years ago.
And I will say that, and he did a lot of run rolling in the other way last
Yeah.
year. But I feel like they're a reactive team. They're not a proactive team. That they wait for other teams to kind of screw up a little bit. They remind
Mhm.
me a lot of Oklahoma, and the issues that we talked about with Oklahoma, I think, are glaring with Kentucky. I will say this, since we have been very critical of Kentucky, I think they have one of the best double play duos in all of the SEC in Luke Lawrence and Tyler Bell.
Yeah.
I like Dylan Kuntz. I like their lineup. I think their lineup's really underrated. But the pitching staff, from an SEC standpoint,
Yeah, that's
I
my
I,
one flaw.
I think it's the pitchings. And again, they're going to piece together some stuff. I think Nick Maggiotti is a fantastic coach. But if we're getting critical of a team, that's where it is.
Yeah.
Moving on to the South Carolina Gamecocks, who sit at 14-3. They have won 5 straight after dropping 3. I think all their losses are to Clemson, right?
Yep. They got swept by Clemson and been perfect since.
Their health is another one with that pitching staff, as I know that Eli Jersenbeck and to some extent, I think it's Dylan Eskew, who they
Mhm.
kicked back into the Saturday role. The thing that scares me about them is that they love to leave guys on base.
Oh
Like,
yes.
at an alarming, like, it is almost crazy that they get so many guys on base to leave them on. I think as much like they're the best hitting team in the SEC with nobody on base, and they are abysmal at getting guys in. And Pulmonary loves to manufacture runs, and if you have a coach that loves to manufacture runs who's not like leaving guys on base, you have to be like doubly bad because you know it's something that they work on.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. They have left a ton of guys on base. They are that Clemson series was terrible hitting. I think this is a perfect like tune-up weekend for them with them getting Morehead State. Obviously, they kicked the living heck out of them. They smoked the
They did
ball all
not.
over
They
the
did
place.
not kick the living heck. I think they won 1-0 today.
Really? I
Yeah,
must have. I
they
must
have
have.
good. They have good starting pitching. Not great starting pitching.
Oh
Like they're
wow.
not like a Florida, LSU. I don't think they're an S tier. They have good starting pitching.
Yeah.
Uh, they don't do anything elite. I'll say that's kind of the other thing with me too. Is there other than Ethan Petrie? Ethan Petrie is
Yeah.
elite, but as a
Yeah.
collective lineup, they don't really get on base they don't manufacture. They're not super athletic like some of these SEC teams.
Hmm.
They're just average. I think in a lot of the stuff, which is fine. I think they're an average SEC team.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
They'll
nothing
be
that
middle of the
jumps
pack.
out. There's nothing that jumps out to me about this team outside of Ethan Petrie.
Yeah, I mean, the Clemson series we were talking about Nathan Hall and Nolan Naraki, like how they're gonna like this was gonna be like their opening up weekend because okay, they're going up against their former school against Clemson, and then it's just kind of like been nothing ever since. I think they're gonna like Ethan Petrie, like yeah, he's gonna ignite this lineup, but someone else got to step up.
They remind me a lot of when Florida was struggling last year.
Hmm.
That you look up and down the lineup, and they have some really big name guys like
Yeah.
Tanner Jones, Talmadge LaCroix, but there's not somebody that you can point at outside of Ethan Petrie. And again, I think Ethan Petrie is going to be first team All SEC.
Yeah.
They need to have somebody. They need to have 3 or 4 guys in the lineup, get on base, bang guys in, get RBIs. And again, it is the critical show. I think that they're going to be 14th or 15th in the SEC. That's my hot take with them. That's where I kind of have them.
I can see that with if the pitching health doesn't get any better, if they don't if they don't generate any runs, they got to generate runs.
Yeah.
Obviously Friday and Saturday they did. I think they scored 16 in both those games, but I'm looking at their stats right now.
Mm-hmm.
Petrie's got 19 RBIs, Nathan Hall's got 14, Jace Wojta's got 11, but then everyone else is under like 9. When you look at some of these other SEC schools, they got guys with 15 to 20 RBIs already.
I mean,
Like,
what Irondale had that this weekend.
yeah, he might have
He had
had
8 in one game. Yeah.
yeah, he had 8 on Friday alone. So, um, yeah, someone else needs to like. And it looks like they have been like trying to plug in some guys here and there in the lineup. Still, they're trying to find their true starting 9, but they need to figure that out pretty quickly. SEC starts next week, and they go to
I will say this. I think that the one
Oklahoma.
thing that could kind of save them is that they have really good starting pitching
Yeah.
on Saturday and Sunday. So they can Sunday salvage a lot of these SEC series and stack up points that way. They could get people on bad weekends. So it'll be interesting to see that aspect of it. Moving on to the Auburn Tigers, who sit at 13-3. My thing with them is I don't think they have a Friday night guy. That's my big issue with them is that they don't have a Friday night guy. I mean, they have Dutton, but I mean, you saw Dutton LSU last year. He hasn't made that big of a jump.
No, he hasn't. I actually agree with that now. Thinking about it because it's looks good so far, but then you put him up against some of these Hawking, you give the ball to someone else. Yeah, I could see that, but then
And
their
the
bullpen's
other
going
thing
to come in
too
and help them.
is there's a lot of guys on this lineup that were there last year that didn't hit very good that are having
They have it.
meteoric rises. So I mean, it feels weird to say, "Oh, my criticism of them is they've hit too good early," but they're another one of those teams where they really didn't play a tough non-conference schedule. So I really don't know how I feel about them personally. I mean, if they can get what they've got out of Cooper McMurray and Derek Fabian, like this is a top 8 team in the country. That's how good I think that their ceiling is. Obviously, there's a reason that Derek Fabian and Cooper McMurray didn't hit that good last year. So when they get some of these teams that expose some of their weaknesses, I think Auburn's in one of those unknown categories, and that's my biggest weakness with them is there's too much unknown because they didn't test themselves. And granted, it really wasn't their fault. Like they didn't play outside of Oregon State. They really didn't play anybody that good. That's kind of my issue with them. Moving on to the Vanderbilt Commodores, they sit at 13-3, winners of 4 straight. They had a nice rebound from a tough weekend. My thing with them is lineup depth outside of RJ Austin and Brady Johnston. And I think that that's a huge, huge red flag when your best hitter is a true freshman. And obviously their health, I think that their health needs to get a little bit better too as well. But the issue that I have with them is that Brady Johnson is too good and that they need to have somebody else.
Brody Johnson's been phenomenal so far. Jacob Humphrey got hot this weekend too. Outside of RJ Austin, Riley Nelson, Brody, and Jacob Humphrey, it's been like nothing so far. They did run roll Xavier on Friday, but that was because Xavier made some mistakes. They ended up walking a lot of guys.
It was also 3-3 very late in that game.
It was. And then Vandy blew it open. But yeah, outside of those 4, even you saying those 2, it's like it has been a lot of Brody Johnson and RJ Austin. My one thing too is JD Thompson. I don't know how I like him as a Friday night guy for Vandy.
He's a good guy on paper, but also at times he hasn't looked like a Friday night guy. So that's the other thing with me too, is that, do we look too much into his non-conference stuff? Was he working on stuff? I think that they have but they're another team where you don't really know about their bullpen.
Yeah. They've tried a lot of guys out. They've thrown a lot of guys. I think they've thrown the most guys in SEC so far to start looking at just watching all of them. It looks like they're trying to figure out a lot of stuff. I know they midweeks for Vandy's, they try and get as many guys as possible. But it's a lot of question marks for their bullpen, I think.
They're also 3-3 away from home, and they didn't really play in intimidating environments. So they have to get that figured out too. That's another really red flag. I have Vandy as a tier 2 SEC team, A tier, if you will.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be fine. I have them as a 2 seed. Obviously, the SEC is going to expose Brody Johnson. It's exposed every single freshman ever. So they're going to need to have some guys step up when Brody gets exposed in one weekend. Moving on to, I think, the 3 that we're going to actually spend a good chunk of our time nitpicking. We'll start with Mississippi State. They sit at 11-1. They are 1-3 away from the dude. They didn't really play a tough non-conference schedule. I saw them 2 weeks ago in Houston. I mean this in the best way possible. They are a boring team.
Yeah, they are.
They have no stars.
Nope.
They have no bad guys though. They have no holes. But at the end of the day, their 2 best hitters are Aaron Downs and Bryce Chance right now. And I don't think Chris Lemonis wants either of them to play. And their ceiling is a lot lower than some of these guys on Mississippi State that are not hitting. They're a very boring team. Their pitching, I will say this. I really like Pico Khan in a Friday night role. At the end of the day, he's a 4-year guy. He's been around the SEC. I don't think Carson Liggins from a Saturday day, I think he's going to get exposed in SEC play. From what I saw from some of the TrackMan data from, was it Oklahoma State that played him on Saturday? Now, who played him on Saturday? Was it Arizona?
Might have been Arizona.
Arizona was not very impressed with Carson Liggins from a pregame standpoint, from a postgame standpoint.
Yeah, it was Arizona.
They knocked him out pretty quick, and they said his fastball was very, very straight. Again, Arizona was a very vocal team, so I got to learn a lot about where these teams do. The first spinner that Carson Liggins broke off, I I think it was one of their hitters. He goes, "That's the curveball." Like, he's like, "I thought he
That's
would be
not
an
good.
elite." Like, again, it could have just had an off night, but I think that
Yeah.
that's where they're struggling is going to be, is that they have a lot of guys. Like, I'm sorry, I love Bryson Chance and Aaron Downs. I think it's a great story in the SEC. I don't think Chris Lemonis envisions them hitting 400 in the 3-hole the entire year, and you can kind of tell it because he doesn't love to start Aaron Downs.
Yeah.
It's a boring team. I think they're going to grind out a lot of games, which is so weird because the dude's such a rowdy environment that the team is
Yeah.
like a very boring team. But that's the issue that I have with them is that they don't have any stars.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just you hit it right on the nail. I mean, Ace Reese, he's came in, he's looked pretty good as well. Hunter Hines has just been struggling. He hasn't looked like himself.
But
Noah
if you
Sullivan.
were going to say this, because I forget who it was, but somebody did a poll where they're like the best baseball player in every state, and they had Hunter Elliott, and all the Mississippi State fans came. Who is Mississippi State's star best player right now? Are you going to say it's Ace Reese? Would you put Ace Reese in the Justin LeBron? No, that's what I said. Is
No, no,
when you compare them to other SEC teams, they do not have a star. They don't have
no, they
somebody in the
don't.
lineup that is getting walked with a base open. They really don't. Every single guy in their lineup, I feel like you can attack. And that's the one thing that I have a lot of issues with Mississippi State
Yeah,
is that they don't have somebody I feel like that they can. I don't feel like they have a leader either. That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting with them too as well.
yeah. This just seems like such a different Mississippi State team than we've seen over the last couple of years. They're just very boring, bland. They don't play that like exciting brand of baseball that they've always have in the past.
I'm going to cook this.
Yeah.
You know what I think they are?
Hmm.
They're a travel team. They're a bunch of guys that are really good. They don't have a set leader. They don't have a set first round SEC type guy. They're a high quality travel team. That's what they really remind me of. Because they're still kind of meshing. I think Lamonis is a great coach. I think the bullpen's a lot better than other people are. But again, they don't really have an elite bullpen guy. So
Yeah.
it's just a bunch of above average guys. They're a lot like South Carolina. I said they reminded me a lot of Texas A&M. I think too. That's a really kind of good comparison that I have for them. Moving on to probably the team that we're going to be the most critical of. Texas A&M sits at 9-6. They were the preseason number 1. They took 2 of 3 from a New Mexico State team that when I talked to some of the coaches at New Mexico State, they were not very impressed with them.
Mhm.
This team has a lot of issues, and I think they're about to be exposed against high-quality SEC teams.
Yeah.
They are not athletic enough to get them out of slumps. They strike out a ton. They have really great starting pitching. I think that they're still kind of working through some of their bullpen stuff. Their health has been a big thing. Again, I have as A&M, the only team I dropped a tier is I had them from tier 1. I dropped them into tier 2.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be a 2 seed, but I think Michael Early is going to have to do an exceptional job coaching. I think he already has. I think he's coaching them through a lot of these wins. I think from a talent standpoint, they're one of the more untalented teams in the SEC. I think Michael Early's coaching and his elite, I think he's a really good coach. I think he's masking a lot of their issues.
I agree. I mean, when you send Ryan Prager out there on a Friday night, you can at least rely on your offense get maybe 1 or 2 runs, and then you can fully rely on Ryan Prager to at least give you 7 to 8 innings of just shut down baseball.
Mhm.
I don't have a lot of confidence in this A&M team right now.
I don't have a lot of confidence in this lineup for when somebody gets rolling from an SEC starting pitching standpoint that they're going to make adjustments. I don't think they make adjustments. I think that they panic a ton too at the plate, that they don't have an approach that they feel comfortable with. And again,
Mhm.
it's not Michael Early at all.
No.
Michael Early is a fantastic hitting coach, and you can see late. I think that's why they're so good late in games. Because if you notice, in the games that they lose, they usually have 8th or 9th inning rallies. I think it's because Michael Early is such a good coach, but they compound bat at bat after bat at bat after bat at bat. And I think they're the most criticized team in the country, and it's started to fall on Michael Early. I don't think that
Yeah.
that's the case at all.
I agree.
I don't think they look lost at the plate 9 times out of 10. And yeah, they have guys that have good weekends. Like this weekend, it was Gavin Cash. 2 weeks ago, it was Wyatt Hensler. But they don't have guys that consistently week in and week out, when if they're not on their best game, they can find a barrel when they're 0 for 2. I don't think that that's how this team's going to operate. And again, I think that that worries me that they can't make adjustments. Because when some of these scouting departments get into this A&M team, they're going to find the deficiencies. They're going to find the holes. And it could be a long season in Aggie land.
Yeah, I agree. It's got to. I think their lineups work okay at bats. If you look at their number, walk a ton. I mean, especially walk a ton. But I mean, this lineup has just. It seems like they're going to live and die by the long ball too. I mean, Caden Kent has been hitting home run after home run, even on his birthday this weekend. But I just don't have a lot of confidence in this lineup, and I think Michael Early has been coaching them through some of these wins.
Yes, and I will say the other thing that really kind of scares me about A&M is Saturday they really didn't play that good and they still won. Today they didn't play bad and they lost. Is that A&M's average game is splitting with New Mexico State. Yes, they're going to have games where they have elite stuff like they had Friday night, but I will say this. We've been very critical of A&M. I think the one saving grace is Ryan Prager's one of the best Friday night guys, wouldn't you say?
Yes, 100%.
Justin Lamkin's one of the best Saturday guys, right?
100%. Yeah.
Miles Patton's the best Sunday guy. They have elite starting pitching when you look at it. Yeah, I mean, you could kind of debate Chase Shores, but again, he's still working through at the end of the day, he's a guy that throws 100 that had Tommy John surgery. You don't know how many innings he's going to be able to eat down the stretch. A&M knows that Miles Patton's going to give him 7. I mean, he's thrown 8 innings already. He's a really efficient pitcher. Yeah. So they have a ton of pitching talent. They need to have somebody in the bullpen step up and get them 3 innings of work. And I don't think that they have somebody in the bullpen that they trust to get 3 innings of work. I feel like for A&M to win games, and granted, I do think that they're very capable of playing perfect baseball, like I said with Arkansas.
Yeah.
But they basically, if they ever want to win a game in the SEC, they have to play perfect baseball. They cannot be bad and win.
Yeah.
Games. They don't have that much talent, which there's a lot of teams in the, like Texas is going to win a lot of games when they don't play their best. Kentucky, but A&M and Arkansas, I think A&M's a poor version of Arkansas. That's who they a lot of the issues that I have with Arkansas, obviously Arkansas is a step above where A&M was, but A&M and Arkansas have very similar problems, I would say.
Yeah, a lot similar bullpen issues, just inconsistencies from the lineup. I 100% agree. And like you said, the only way A&M's on a poor version of Arkansas right now is Ryan Prager is a better starter than Gackle on Friday night, but I 100% agree.
Yeah. Moving on to our last team, Missouri sits at 8-8. They are the only SEC team near 500. They are 4-4 at home, 1-1 in a neutral site, and 3-3 on the road. They're 16th in the SEC. They're probably one of the worst teams in a power conference. Let's be positive with Missouri. If Missouri steals a series in the SEC, how do you think that they do it? Because I think they're going to beat somebody, and I don't know who it is. It's going to be somebody at home that's looking ahead. How does Missouri win a series in the SEC? And I'll give you a little bit of time to pull. I'll pull up Missouri's schedule. Point out the series that you think Missouri wins.
I actually got it right now. Actually. I think, well, it actually depends who this school has after them. I don't want to reveal it yet, but I am seeing this. I am going to see Missouri play LSU this week at the box. So I get to see them in person. I've gotten to watch some of their games. It hasn't been pretty games, obviously. So I think they are going to end up taking, yes, I think they are going to upset next weekend. That's my hot take right now. I think um Ole Miss goes to Missouri next weekend.
Oh, you have
And
it
Ole
that
Miss,
early.
yep, Ole Miss has Florida the next weekend, and I think they might be looking a little ahead to that.
I'll say this. Here's my prediction with it. I think Texas has the nightmare scenario of they have Missouri sandwiched between LSU and Georgia at home.
Yeah.
Which I don't think Texas is worse than Missouri. But if you're
No.
gonna make me pick a trap series for Missouri, I think that it's that one.
A little welcome to the SEC moment.
It's not gonna be Florida because Florida is gonna be
No.
pissed off. Who's A&M have after Missouri?
A&M after Missouri.
I'll get their schedule pulled up because I don't have it memorized.
I'm pretty sure they have.
They have LSU and Georgia too as well.
Yeah.
I will say this: the way that the season is kind of playing out, I think that's going to be one that A&M needs to have happen. So I don't think that that's a drop spot because I have a feeling with the way that the SEC schedule is written, A&M is going to really be searching for wins at that point.
Yeah. But I mean, Missouri, Coach Jackson over at Missouri, I've had buddies play under him in summer ball and travel ball when he used to be at Southern. He can get these guys to pull together some SEC quality wins. I can definitely see them taking series on the road, and yeah.
Yeah, I think Eric Johnson's a fantastic coach. Oklahoma's another one I could see them dropping.
Yeah.
It's going to be a trap though. They're going to get somebody. So put your name on it. You think Ole Miss? I think Texas.
Yep. I think Ole Miss.
Well, Andrew, I think that's all we have time for. We'll be back on Thursday to kind of preview all of these SEC series in deep dive form. Hopefully we'll have some starting pitchers released from there. We're going to be doing pick'ems too as well, so be sure to tune in for that. Thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you on Thursday.